ever since he was candidate Joe Biden, now President Joe Biden has wanted higher taxes from you just because you're rich. While a record number of Americans pay zero federal income tax at all, you should pay more. And today we're going to talk about 6 specific tax hikes that Joe Biden wants you to pay. One of the things I always want to clarify is I don't necessarily think as a politically homeless person that the other party is going to be the great savior. I mean, you've seen George W. Bush, you saw Donald Trump. They lowered tax rates from 39.6 to 35 and 37% respectively. Not exactly tax haven rates. I mean, still calls for going where you're treated best. But Joe Biden in particular is looking to pass and has proposed 6 different tax increases. I'm going to share the article with Forbes from you so that you can be prepared. We've been talking about many of these for years now. If it's your first time here, my name is Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of a boutique consultancy called Nomad Capitalist. We help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally reduce their taxes overseas, diversify and protect their assets, and increase their freedom and options with things like second passports. I'm also the host of the biggest and best offshore conference called Nomad Capitalist Live. From Forbes, they ask, are higher taxes coming to go along with inflation? As if that wasn't a high enough tax to begin with. It sure looks that way. This is by Robert W. Wood. And while some of the spin is being directed at the billionaire's tax that actually kicks in at $1/10 billion, that's correct, Robert. A little bit of sleight of hand there where they call it the billionaire's tax and then they actually kind of just slip it. Oh, you got $100 million. You know what? A lot of people with companies, especially in the lower interest rate environment where people borrow money to buy up companies with cheap money, you could have a company that's moderately successful, and that company alone could be worth $100 million, and you would be snapped up by a billionaire's tax, even if you're just an everyday citizen running a relatively successful business. There are plenty of other tax hikes proposed for more modest earners too. Isn't that always how it works? Here's what's in store for you if the Biden administration's raft of ambitious tax hikes becomes law the way the Biden administration hopes they will. And by the way, even if Joe Biden doesn't get them through, the direction of the country is towards higher taxes, towards demonizing high earners, and away from any kind of economic freedom. We've been talking about that. The United States is now the 25th freest economy in the world. It's hardly North Korea, but it's also hardly where it was when I was a kid and started reading the index. The trend is in the wrong direction, and a big country like the United States, a big part of the world like the Western world, is not very nimble. They don't turn on a dime as easily as a tiny country that wants to bring in investment. They're headed in the wrong direction, and even if Joe Biden doesn't get these tax increases through, it's only a matter of time before that happens. That's why having a second residence, having a second passport, having some money overseas that's legally reported when necessary, all good ideas to make sure you are prepared. Here's the first tax hike. Number 1, increasing top tax rates for individuals. The top tax bracket for individuals was 39.6% for many years until Trump at a cooperative Congress lowered it to, 37%. Ooh, you really got a big savings there, starting in 2018. I mean, who needs to buy when you can go to 37%? But President Biden wants to back it up from 37 to 39.6. The 2.6 rate hike would actually kick in for the $450,000 joint filing and $400,000 for single taxpayers. Number 2, capital gains taxed as ordinary income at over $1 million. How about long-term capital gains? Well, their highest rate is currently 20%, but then, of course, you have to add in the 3.8% Obamacare tax, which makes it 23.8%. Still vastly better than 37 and certainly better than 39.6. Add on that potentially if you live in California, you get stuck again. However, one of the president's proposals is to tax long-term capital gains and qualified dividends as ordinary income. Ordinary income. Forget dividend tax, forget capital gains. Countries like Singapore don't even bother taxing those. They do have taxes on income. They don't bother with that. In the U.S., they don't just want to have a special tax rate that's a little bit lower to encourage investment, to encourage investing in the country. No, now if you make $1 million, you are evil. That is the trend. From Elizabeth Warren saying that if you're rich, you're probably a tax cheat, to Joe Biden saying if you make over $1 million, you have to pay more. And then again, he says, California's 13.3%. Add that on, you could be over 50%. And I've talked to folks who are over 50% on their short-term gains. Now it's going to be long-term gains as well. The third way Joe Biden wants to raise your taxes, repeal of the step-up in basis. One of the biggest changes that the president hopes to make would be a tax on death. As if all the taxes your entire life aren't enough, they're going to tax you when you're dead. People like him want to call it the estate tax. It sounds a lot nicer than saying when you die, we literally, harvest your corpse for one more bounty. Under present law, inheritance Property receives a full fair market value tax basis on death. The step-up in basis provides tax benefits for everyone passing down appreciated assets, including real estate, stock, family companies, and more. For generations, assets held at death have received the stepped-up basis to market value when you die. Small businesses count on this. The proposal is to repeal that entirely, and they say they don't hate small business. They say it's only about billionaires, but that's not true because they want to lower the estate tax exemption as well. That way, your heirs can sell property they inherit and not have to pay income tax on the increase in value of the descendant's life. But that long-coveted step-up basis would go away under the Biden administration's plan. There would be a $5 million exclusion from gain on property transferred by gift, and this would be cumulative. But once you use it up, the days of the step-up basis will be gone if the provision passes. So small businesses and anyone passing anything to the farm, it's all gone. Just pay, pay, pay. Number 4 is the 20% minimum tax if you have $100 million. This is the new unrealized capital gains tax with an element of a wealth tax. This is what they call the billionaire's tax, he says, which arguably, again, was misnamed. It would slap a minimum 20% on all income, including unrealized gains, things you never sell, for taxpayers with a net worth of greater than $100 million. I've been telling people, for example, in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency for years, they said, just borrow against your crypto. Well, they're going to start out at $100 million. If it doesn't pass now, it'll pass later. And then eventually, even every year as $100 million becomes less and less valuable, they'll lower it still. It'll be 50, it'll be 20. Once the camel's nose is under the tent, there's no stopping it. The rate just keeps going down. It's like the alternative minimum tax, where it used to be you were really rich if you paid that. They never adjusted it. And now it's just, you're just an average wage earner sitting in San Francisco or New York. That's what they do. It traps more and more people over time. And it includes, he says, a requirement to report all assets and your basis to the IRS annually. One of the things I've talked about is it's one thing to reduce your taxes. For a lot of people, the real win is not having to go through the cost and the arduous process of reporting and filing your taxes. You know what? If you told me, hey, come and live in our country, just send us a check send us $100,000. Okay, where do I sign up? If I want to live in your country, $100,000, sure. And by the way, there are countries in Europe like that. It's called lump sum taxation. Countries like Italy offer it. You pay them 100,000 euros, and within some set of rules, you can really make as much money as you want. That seems like a fair deal since the average Italian is paying far, far less than 100,000 euros. But the benefit in some of those kinds of programs, not all, is that you just get to be left alone. The benefit of certain offshore companies is not even that you lower the tax. Of course, that's great. But it's that you don't spend weeks of your year putting together tax returns, double checking everything, sweating and hoping you did everything right, hoping you filed everything correctly. They want to change that. They want to make it harder on you. The provision is complex, and these few lines only scratch the surface, he says. The sea change would be to subject to tax just a rise in value with no triggering event, no sale, nothing. Talk about radical. He's right. It sounds a little bit like property tax, where the value of your property is assessed every year, and then if it goes down in value, we don't know. You figured that out. They haven't gotten that far yet. But however you look at it, this one is scary, even if most of us are never going to get close to $100 million. But again, with inflation, with businesses going up in value, $100 million is certainly a lot of money. But there are more people than you would expect that are in that range when the IRS starts determining how much money you have. Number 5 is repeal the carried interest perk. He wants to tax carried interest in partnership and LLCs as ordinary income. That's been in the chopping block for a few times over the decades, and the enormous tax perk has been stridently defended by hedge funds, private equity funds, and others. That one's going to go away. Number 6, and this one's really going to hurt investors, and one reason that people say the U.S. is still the best country to invest in because we have all the tax incentives on real estate. It's one of the few areas. Robert Kiyosaki came to Nomad Capitalist Live, and I said, listen, I don't want to invest in U.S. real estate. It's more hassle, same way as filing the taxes. More things to do. When I sold my last 2 properties in the US, the number of things that came out, the deductions that came out from the sale price, it was endless. I don't see that anywhere else in the world where I invest. But now, for those of you who do like to invest in the US, they want to repeal 1031. The like-kind exchange under Section 1031 of the tax code, which allows you to swap tax-free real estate, what he calls the everyman's tax planning. You can keep it on swapping for decades without cashing out. You're just going to keep turning over your properties, 1031ing one into the next, eventually deferring. You already saw certain deferral for expats go away. Now, the president wants to repeal 1031s, he says. The proposal would only leave in place a limited 1031 deferral program that would allow deferral of gain from like kind of exchanges up to $500,000 if you're single and $1 million if you are joint each year. Beyond those figures, the 1031 would be dead. If lobbyists are working hard to keep the carried interest perk, that's certainly true, and he's correct with the 1031. The real estate industry doesn't want that to go away. So good thing you don't live in a corrupt country, or else there would be no lobbyists to come in and stop you from losing your 1031. It's a good thing that your country isn't corrupt. And that the lobbyists don't run the show. The real estate industry at large and the 1031 industry have a lot of power to yield. And he ends with there may actually be many more many more tax hikes in the president's 2023 budget, but these 6 are the big ones. Stay tuned, and those are ominous words. Listen, my prognosis, when I left the U.S. for good, when I cut all my ties, what I gained from that, forget, everyone says, taxes. No. Certainly fine. You're out of the tax net. You're out of the complication of the tax net. There's no more the burden, no doubt. I said to myself, when I was making the decision to cut my final ties with the U.S., what are they going to come up with next? And by the way, for me, it was under Donald Trump. That does not mean I'm pro-Trump. Doesn't mean I'm anti-Trump. Again, I'm politically homeless. And so I can see what both sides are doing, and I see that the Republicans have not exactly lowered your taxes to the lowest rates in the world. They haven't really helped you. They haven't cut regulations to what you could cut in other countries. But under Trump, it was America first, and it was, we're going to make life harder for expats. And I said, if that's the conversation, life is only going to get harder. Let me just, I don't want to stick around for that. And so these are already in the menu. Whether Joe Biden repeals 1031, and a lot of folks think, hey, nobody likes Joe Biden. He's not going to get anything through. You get a Republican Congress. Some of these things could eventually be stuck in there. And by the way, you had tax hikes under the Republicans. Some of this stuff maybe makes it in something. I would doubt that, but maybe it makes it in something. And if nothing else, eventually the Democrats come back and they do it. In the meantime, they're trying to make it harder for you to get a golden visa, harder for you to get a second citizenship. Isn't that kind of coincidental how at the same time all these Western countries are like trying to close the tax loopholes and raise your rates and make it harder to get out, and like they close all the renunciation appointments in like all but 6 of the embassies? Like, isn't it interesting? Like the same time they're doing that, they want to raise taxes and make it harder to get out. Like, maybe it's a coincidence. I don't know. But it would seem to me that having some kind of second passport, that you had a backup plan, that you were ready in advance, that they didn't make the second citizenship so arduous to get in the future that you just gave up and then allowed yourself to become a sitting duck for the next round of tax increases. These things are going to happen. And so diversifying yourself with second citizenship, with some international real estate investments, 1031 exists overseas too, like kind to like kind. You can use that on international property, and if they take it away, then eventually they take it away, and you've just got property in a country where they don't want to take away your tax incentives. Wouldn't that be nice to have some property, to have a passport, to have a bank account in a country where they actually welcomed your business, not constantly tried to tax it? Joe Biden wouldn't know anything about what that's like.